My name is Alice Morgan. I'm 31 years old and live in Brooklyn, New York. If someone asked me when I started over, I probably wouldn't answer, because the truth is, I was never given a chance to start. I grew up in a small town in Oregon, where everything revolved around my parents' idea of a perfect family. My dad was a structural engineer, my mom a high school teacher, and my brother Adam, the golden child of the entire family. Every time someone mentioned Adam, they spoke with the kind of pride reserved for heroes. He has his father's smile and his mother's brains. And me? I was the quiet daughter, the one who read books alone, unremarkable, forgettable. I remember vividly my 16th birthday. Adam got a brand new red Jeep Wrangler with a giant ribbon, just like in those commercials. Me? A set of second-hand books wrapped in newspaper. No card, no note. When I asked, my mom said, "You love books, don't you?" Then turned to Adam. "Don't forget to thank your dad for the car." I was smart, very smart, but at home, grades were never enough to make them pause and actually see me. While Adam failed to get into college twice and was still praised for finding his path, I secured a full-ride scholarship to NYU, one of the country's top computer science programs. All I got was, "New York is expensive, figure it out." They didn't give me a single dollar, but when Adam got accepted to a private college in California, they threw him a going-away party and paid all his tuition. That Thanksgiving cut deep. I flew home with a torn suitcase after pulling 3 consecutive shifts at a coffee shop, rushing to finish my final project. I placed the pumpkin pie I had baked from scratch on the table. My mom glanced at it and pushed it aside. "I already made one, Alice, we don't need more." At dinner, my dad raised a glass to toast Adam for launching his own mobile gaming startup. The room erupted in applause. Then someone asked, just to be polite, "And Alice?" My mom chuckled. "She's still studying computer science, something with machines." A few relatives nodded vaguely. One muttered, "Like fixing printers?" Laughter followed. I forced a weak smile. No one knew I was ranked in the top 3 of my class. No one asked. I didn't stay for dessert. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and said flatly, "Thanks for the meal." My mom looked away. Adam called after me, "Don't get mad, you're so sensitive." I didn't reply. That night, I boarded a bus back to New York, sitting alone in the last row, headphones on with no music playing. I rented a tiny room near Harlem. Moldy walls, creaky floors. But at least it was mine. I worked weekends at a car wash, did freelance coding online, and survived on instant noodles month after month. No one helped me. But I didn't need anyone anymore. I graduated with a perfect GPA. A week after the ceremony, I received a job offer from a cybersecurity firm based in Manhattan, working with government-level systems. Not only was I hired, I was named lead on a project integrating AI into enterprise-level banking firewalls. 2 years later, I got promoted. 3 months after that, I signed the contract for my first apartment. A studio in the heart of Brooklyn, with gray tile floors, high ceilings, and huge windows facing the park. When I held the keys, I didn't cry. I just clenched my fist and thought, "This is mine. I built this." No one in my family knew what I was doing in New York. No one cared. I'd disappeared from the Christmas photos my mom posted every year, replaced by the neighbor's dog or a fake plastic tree. They erased me from the story. And I let them. In my world, though, the name Alice Morgan was slowly gaining weight. After 3 years at Halcyon Systems, a cybersecurity company serving major financial institutions and several federal agencies, I was promoted to lead systems integration. When the CTO called me into his office, he said one thing. "Alice, most people don't understand what you do. But without you, the whole system would collapse." My salary had already passed 6 figures. Each quarter my performance bonus was enough to pay off my entire mortgage in 3 years if I wanted. But I wasn't flashy. I still took the subway to work, packed my own sandwiches for lunch, and wore an old watch I bought back in college. My apartment in Carroll Gardens was compact but sun-filled. I chose it because the morning light hit just right on the desk where I liked to code. Pinewood floors, high ceilings, exposed red brick. I kept it all intact, only adding a vintage map of New York for charm. I didn't post anything on social media. On LinkedIn, my bio simply read, "Currently working in enterprise security system development." Even if my mom searched, she wouldn't find a trace. They wanted me gone. So I disappeared on my terms, quiet, precise, and without leaving a single thread for them to pull. The people who truly knew me could be counted on one hand. Emma, my college roommate, now a human rights lawyer. Sean, a colleague from my first year, who once stayed up all night helping me debug a misplaced comma. And Lynn, a Taiwanese designer who lived downstairs and shared my first dinner in the new apartment over instant noodles and scented candles before I installed lighting. We didn't host loud get-togethers. Once a month I'd invite them over. A worn oak table I found on Craigslist. A beige linen tablecloth, beeswax candles, mismatched plates that were clean enough. Some nights we built our own tacos, other nights homemade pizza. We talked politics, design theory, the latest tech scandals. And sometimes, just sometimes, I'd tell a short story about the old town. About Adam. About the time my mom pulled away when I tried to hug her before leaving. "Do you ever think about telling them how you're really doing?" Emma once asked while pouring more wine. I shook my head. They don't care. And honestly, I don't feel like anything's missing. It wasn't bitterness. I just learned that some things are better left untouched. Like deep scars that only ache when pressed. Last December, I received an unexpected project bonus, $85,000 after tax. It was a milestone. The risk analysis system our team designed had just been adopted by one of the country's top 5 banks across their entire global network. I quietly moved part of it into a long-term investment fund. The rest? I bought an Italian espresso machine I'd been eyeing for years. No one praised me, but each morning, as I inhaled the scent of fresh espresso, I felt I was living right. And living enough. Toward the end of the year, Halcyon asked me to speak at a tech conference in Chicago. On stage, discussing data security in the AI era, I looked out over hundreds of eyes watching me, and remembered the moment my mom once said, "You should choose a more feminine career. Working with computers all day will leave you single." I ended my presentation with a line that made the whole room go quiet. I was once told to stay quiet so I'd be easier to love. But I've found that everything I've built came from doing the opposite. When the applause came, I didn't feel proud. I felt free. Free because, at last, I didn't need to prove my worth to anyone but myself. That night, I sat alone in the hotel room, watching snowfall outside the window. A message from Lynn popped up. "Your apartment looks like it belongs in a design magazine now." I smiled, then quietly turned off my phone. Not because I wanted to avoid anyone, but because I was finally living the life I rewrote from scratch. Not with tears, but with code, discipline, and silence. Exactly when it mattered most. I was making coffee when the phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized, but it wasn't blocked either. A soft, hesitant voice came through. "Alice, it's me, Natalie." I froze for a second. Natalie? My cousin. Aunt Carol's daughter. The last person in the family I still spoke to before I cut ties completely. "What's going on?" I asked, my hand still resting on the espresso lever. "I'm not sure how to say this. But your parents want you to come home for Christmas." 8 or 8 years? I blurted out, then let out a short laugh. "I know it sounds weird, but they asked if I still had your number. I told them I did. They said if you agreed, they'd welcome you properly." I turned off the drip from the pour-over and set the cup on the counter. Outside, snow had started to fall. The kind that hinted December was about to take over. "When now?" "I don't know for sure." Maybe because Adam moved back in after his startup fell apart. Maybe because Grandma's getting weaker. Or maybe because you're doing well. Natalie paused. They said they want to make amends. Make amends. It sounded like the tap of a knife on a glass cup. Fragile, hollow, and not quite real. I didn't answer Natalie right away. After the call, I walked nearly an hour through the snow to my office. Not because I had to, but because I needed to think. Every step on the icy sidewalk echoed a question. What do they want? Are they serious? And more importantly, do I need their forgiveness to finally close the chapter? A week later, I sent an email. I'll come to Oregon. 3 days. I didn't give them an exact arrival time or ask if they needed me to bring anything. I booked the cheapest flight, rented a car from the airport, and drove straight to the old house. The same one where I used to count the cracks in my bedroom ceiling during high school. The house hadn't changed much. The white picket fence was peeling, the porch leaned slightly to one side, and the pine tree in the yard looked even older than I remembered. I let the engine run for a few seconds, took a deep breath. Mom opened the door. She looked smaller than in my memory, as if 8 years had dulled the sharpness in her eyes. She stepped onto the porch, raising a hand like she wasn't sure whether to hug me. I gave a small nod. You really came back. 3 days, I reminded her, and I drove myself. Inside, the house smelled familiar. Old wood, pre-cooked food, and an air freshener barely masking something older. Adam sat on the couch, legs propped on the coffee table, phone in hand. He looked up without smiling. Well, look who it is, the big shot developer from New York. Remember where your spot is? I glanced at him, hung my coat, kicked off my shoes, and walked straight into the kitchen. Mom followed behind. I made your favorite meat pie from when you were little. Your dad will be so happy to see you. Is he home? Out shopping with Adam. They'll be back soon. Oh, your old room is Adam's office now. You'll be sleeping in the living room. I nodded. No surprise there. Dinner wasn't terrible. I didn't say much. Adam dominated the table, going on and on about investment opportunities, new product chains, and strategic visions. My parents nodded like they were watching a TED Talk. How about you? Dad finally asked, as if realizing I was present. I'm fine, I said. Work is good. To doing something with computer networks, Mom added, eyes still fixed on her soup. Enterprise security for large companies. Adam smirked. Like stopping hackers, huh, cool. I said nothing. After dinner, I helped Mom clear the table. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the plates. I noticed her glance at me briefly before looking away. Thanks for coming back, she said softly. Even if it's just for a few days. I looked at her. I wanted to ask, why now? I wanted to ask, did you ever think about me in the past 8 years? But instead, I gave a dry smile. I came to see if anything's really changed. Then I turned around and poured more hot water into my mint tea. Christmas Eve. The house was strangely crowded. Wooden chairs were lined along the hallway, the dining table extended with 2 worn folding tables, mismatched tablecloths barely covering the scuffed surface. The warm yellow lighting gave the place a cozy illusion, if you didn't know what was really about to unfold inside. Mom pointed me toward a chair near the kitchen, right beside the dishwasher, where steam and garlic oil rose nonstop. The chair had no cushion, its back wobbly. I glanced around. Adam sat in the center, flanked by my parents, Aunt Carol, Uncle Henry, and other relatives from my dad's side. A few cousins, I hadn't seen since 2015, were there too. Everyone had a proper seat. Except me. Perfect timing, my mom said loudly, making sure the whole table heard. We still had a spot left. I pulled the chair out and sat down without a word. In front of me was a white plastic fork, the kind you find at office potlucks. Everyone else was using the silver flatware Mom only brought out for special occasions. Adam, as if waiting for his cue, launched into his pitch. We're heading into our second funding round. This product is a mental health app for content creators. The AI analyzes speech and keywords to detect signs of stress. Sounds brilliant, Uncle Henry exclaimed. You looking for investors? My dad leaned on his elbows, clearly excited. How much do you need to get started? About 200,000 should be enough to finish the MVP, Adam said, eyes gleaming. Then we'll demo it at the conference in Austin this March. I looked up, trying not to laugh. 200 grand for a prototype, with no validation, no user testing, no baseline data? Adam turned to me, lips curled. Oh, right. You're the cybersecurity person, huh? Still typing code in some basement all day? Tough life. I smiled. Some days, yeah. Others, I'm flying to meet clients. Last week I was in Boston with the tech team from a major finance firm. They just signed a $2.5 million contract for the integrated system we built. Silence. Just the sound of forks clinking against plates. Mom cut in, trying to redirect the energy. Let's not talk about work tonight. It's the holidays. Everyone, eat up. Aunt Carol turned to me, tilting her head. Sounds like your job keeps you busy, but do you feel connected to anything? I didn't quite get the question, but I understood the implication. No husband, no kids, no photos of gingerbread houses or matching pajamas. To them, that meant my life was empty. I'm connected enough, I replied calmly. Not everyone measures fulfillment the same way. Adam chuckled. Sounds like a TED Talk. Next time, wear a turtleneck and bring a clicker. The whole table laughed. I set my fork down and took a slow breath. It wasn't the joke that bothered me. It was the repetition. Same laughter, same glances, same feeling I had 15 years ago. They hadn't changed. Still making me feel like the dramatic one, even when I was just breathing. After dinner, my mom handed me a wool blanket and a thin pillow. You can set up on the living room sofa. Adam's using your room as his office now. Printer, papers, all that stuff. I nodded. Thanks, Mom. Oh, she added, make sure to pack it up in the morning, the kids are coming early. I placed the blanket on the couch, saying nothing. On the mantel near the fireplace, a framed photo of Adam in his graduation suit still sat proudly. No picture of me. No memory. No trace I'd ever existed here. In the quiet living room, I opened my laptop to check emails. One stood out. A speaking invitation from a cybersecurity conference in San Francisco. They wanted me to be the keynote speaker on opening day. Topic: Building strong foundations in an unstable world. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I typed, I accept. Please send the prep schedule. When I closed the laptop, I looked up at the ceiling. The old crack stretched from the light fixture to the edge of the wall, still there. But I wasn't the person under it anymore. Christmas morning, I woke up earlier than everyone else. The sun hadn't fully risen, its pale light filtering through the living room window, casting a faint glow over the sofa where I'd slept the night before. I quietly brewed coffee, using the clunky old machine on the kitchen counter. The thin aroma reminded me I was no longer the 18-year-old girl who used to cry silently in her old bedroom. By 8 a.m., footsteps echoed from the stairs. Adam and his wife, Grace, came down like they were in a commercial for the perfect family holiday. She was 6 months pregnant, belly visible under a beige knit dress. They wore matching pajamas, with Mom and Dad-to-be printed across their chests. "Merry Christmas!" Adam said loudly, as if demanding everyone join in. My parents appeared right behind them, arms full of gift boxes wrapped in ribbons of every color. The Christmas tree in the corner was nearly buried under a mountain of packages. I stepped forward and placed my own small gifts on the coffee table. Each one chosen thoughtfully, carefully, for each person. A pair of real leather gloves for Dad, because I knew he still drove to work in the freezing cold. A bottle of luxury perfume for Mom, the exact one she once mentioned in a magazine I happened to read. A hardcover collection by Malcolm Gladwell for Adam, because if he was serious about running a startup, he could start by reading. And for Grace, a cashmere scarf, as light as air, in olive green, perfect for her complexion and soft eyes. As the gifts were opened, no one said anything for a few seconds. "Wow," my mom finally said. "This perfume. It's the limited edition." My dad nodded. "Nice gloves. Not cheap either." Grace rubbed the scarf against her cheek. "Thank you, Alice. Real." Adam picked up the book, read the author's name, and scoffed. "Still gifting the deep stuff, huh?" I didn't respond. When the gifts were all unwrapped, I sat back down, sipping from my coffee cup. "What about Alice's present?" Grace asked, glancing around, puzzled. Silence. All eyes turned to my mother. She gave a nervous laugh. "Oh my goodness, I must have forgotten. My brain these days. Maybe I left it somewhere upstairs." "It's okay," I said quickly. "Everyone's busy." Adam burst out laughing. "Haha, just like when we were kids. Mom always forgot, and you'd get all serious about it. Come on, you're grown now." Still calm, I replied. "It's really okay. Actually, I'd prepared a little something for myself this year." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a set of stainless steel keys, holding them up. The morning light caught the polished surface, flashing across the room. My mom frowned. "What's that?" "Keys to my new apartment in Soho. 2 bedrooms, big balcony, near the river. I officially closed last week." The room fell as quiet as if someone had pulled the plug. My dad looked up. "You bought it? You mean, with your own money?" "Of course," I said, placing the keys on the table. "Bonus from the last project we wrapped up with Morgan and Brock, the investment bank in Boston. The company paid me $150,000 after taxes." Adam stopped laughing. Grace stopped touching the scarf. My mom stepped back slightly, gripping the edge of her chair. "$150,000? She echoed, her voice cracking. "Just the bonus," I emphasized. "Doesn't include base salary or equity." My dad looked at my mom, then back at me. "What exactly do you do at that company?" "Lead systems integration," I said. "I handle high-level security architecture and risk analysis. I manage Fortune 500 corporate accounts." I wasn't bragging, I was telling the truth. The kind of truth they had never wanted to hear. Mom's tone shifted immediately, like flipping a switch she'd used 1,000 times. "Oh my gosh, Alice, you're incredible, we're so proud of you. I had no idea you'd come this far. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We would have celebrated with you." I gave a dry smile. "You never asked." Adam sat up straight. "Soho, huh? Is it big? Near the subway? Are you thinking of renting out the second room?" I looked at my brother, then at my parents. Their eyes were shimmering with hope. Not the kind that came from love, but the kind that waited for a share. "The apartment's mine," I said firmly. "I bought it to live in, not to prove anything." No one said another word. The coffee had gone cold. But in me something clearer had awakened. Sharp and certain, like the sound of keys landing on a wooden table. I had always existed here, they had just never chosen to see it. That afternoon, after Christmas lunch, Mom called me into the dining room where Dad and Adam were already seated. They'd made coffee, 3 cups on the table, like it was a formal meeting. I stepped in, sensing the shift in the air. No more sarcasm or dismissive glances, just a forced calm hiding urgency. "Sit down, sweetheart," my dad said, his voice unusually gentle. It made me wary. I sat but didn't touch the coffee. Adam cleared his throat. "You know, my app project is at a critical stage. We have a prototype, positive feedback, now we need to scale. And to do that, we need funding." I looked at him. His eyes weren't smug, just calculating. "And we thought," Dad added, This could be a great opportunity for the whole family. Family invests in each other, right? I said nothing. You mentioned getting a big bonus, Mom chimed in. This is the perfect time to invest in something promising. Just 200 grand, Adam said like he was asking for grocery money. That's probably nothing for you now. I folded my hands calmly, even surprising myself. Silence. No, Mom echoed, voice sharper than usual. I'm not giving money to anyone in this family, I said clearly. Especially not for an untested idea with no proven revenue model, led by someone who's never held a job longer than a year. Adam flushed. You're underestimating me. No, I replied. I'm evaluating based on facts. And the fact that you've been praised endlessly despite proving nothing. Yeah, I've seen that all my life. Mom slammed her hand on the table. Alice, you're being unreasonable. This is a chance to reconnect. To heal the years we've lost. I cut in. Lost years caused by who? When I got the full ride to NYU, everyone congratulated Adam for not giving up. When I moved out, what did you say? Figure it out. Meanwhile, Adam had a whole send-off party. I haven't forgotten. Dad frowned. Things were tight back then. Tight, but still enough to buy Adam a car for his 18th birthday? While I got a used book and a broken umbrella? I smirked. Funny how now you're preaching connection and family. Adam growled. So this is revenge? Using money to shame our parents? This isn't revenge, I said coldly. This is me refusing to be used anymore. Mom shot up. You're selfish. This family raised you, fed you, educated you. I stood too. Raised me? That's a parent's duty. And school. NYU paid for me, Mom, not you. You'll regret this, she screamed. One day you'll need your family, and no one here will be waiting. I looked at them, 3 people who'd made me feel like a stranger in my own home. Used to wait, I whispered. Waited to be seen. To be treated like I belonged. But I've outgrown that. I'm done waiting. I walked out, packed my bags in under 2 minutes. When I returned, Mom was in the hallway, pale, wide-eyed with rage or shock. I'm going back to New York, I said, opening the door. I don't need this house or a family that circles like vultures at the scent of money. She stepped forward. Then don't ever come back. I nodded. That's the first sensible thing you've ever said to me. The door clicked shut, like a book torn from its spine. I stepped into the wind. Not cold, just light. The bus pulled out of town just as the sunset slipped behind the pine ridge to the west. I didn't look back. Everything inside me had already shut down. Not from fresh wounds, but because the old ones had finally healed in the most unexpected way. With finality. 3 days after I returned to Brooklyn, the first flood of messages came in. The first was from Aunt Carol. What you did to your mother was cruel. Who treats their family like that? Then Uncle Henry. Don't forget who raised you. Adam is your brother. He needs your support. I read them without replying. They never messaged when I washed dishes, to afford college textbooks, never called when I was living in a damp room in Harlem. But now that they knew I had money, they reappeared. As if fairness was a debt I owed in cash. I blocked each number without hesitation. Except one, Natalie. Natalie called me that Friday evening, her voice soft over the phone. I didn't know things at home got that bad. Mom says, you've changed. I laughed. If changed means I don't stay silent when I'm disrespected anymore, then yeah. I changed. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I really am. I said nothing. But after I hung up, I smiled. Natalie was the only one who never asked me for anything. Not even forgiveness. In February, I got promoted at Halcyon Systems. New position, lead architect for a national hospital network's AI-integrated internal security infrastructure. I led a team of 12 engineers, worked directly with government-level stakeholders, and oversaw the entire testing and deployment process. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove I was worth something. Everyone on the team listened to me, collaborated with me, believed in me. Not out of obligation, but because I was genuinely good at what I did. Good in the way no one in my family ever wanted to admit. Every Tuesday night, I still went to that little bar near the corner of Smith and Carroll, where the leather sofas were worn and the string lights glowed warm. That's where I met Jamie, a tech consultant for social impact startups. She was smart, witty, a great listener, and never once asked about my family. We usually talked about the unexpected, data privacy, women in tech, and the best ramen spots around Brooklyn. In April, Jamie introduced me to her best friend, Andrew. He was a freelance product designer who lived in Williamsburg. Curly hair, deep eyes, and most importantly, he respected people's space. When I told him I had cut off my biological family, he didn't ask, why? He just said, sometimes, the best thing we can do for people is disappear, so we both can breathe. I liked that Andrew didn't try to fix me. He wasn't in a hurry to build anything. He just walked with me through every little stretch of a journey I'd never had company on. Every time I said, I'm okay being alone, he'd just smile, me too. But that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. We didn't put labels on what we were. But I knew I was loved. In a quiet way, without conditions, without pressure, without weaponizing past pain. One early summer day, as Andrew and I ate ice cream on a bench in Fort Greene Park, my phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. Mom just told the whole extended family you won the lottery. I had to laugh. They're trying to find ways to contact you. I replied with one short sentence. Let them think that. I did win. P. Andrew glanced over, tilting his head. Funny message? I nodded, slipping the phone into my pocket. My old family just added another conspiracy theory to the list. So, now their list's longer than Marvel's, he teased. I laughed. Not the forced kind, an honest, comfortable laugh. In September that year, I received a package, with no return address. Just a scribbled note. We need to talk. Urgent. Inside was a rough business plan from Adam, along with a blue ink message. The family is struggling. If Alice can contribute at least $100,000, we'd all be grateful. Adam. I didn't respond. I wasn't even angry. I just found it amusing. Once, they said I was a burden. Now they saw me as the only life raft in the waters drowning them. About a week later, Natalie texted, Adam called my mom, heard they might lose the house to the bank. I didn't ask why. I didn't feel like I needed to do anything. It wasn't heartlessness. I just wasn't naive anymore. I used to believe they'd one day realize their mistakes, apologize, make things right. But no. They didn't regret hurting me, they only regretted that I was no longer easy to control. That winter, Andrew and I moved in together, into a 3-story brownstone in Park Slope. I bought the house with savings and dividends from 4 years at Halcyon. We renovated the ground floor into a shared workspace. I had my own programming office, while Andrew set up a small design studio with white walls and wooden shelves full of mock-up. Every morning, we drank coffee on the front steps. Andrew often placed a small plate of pastries on the railing for the gray squirrel living in the oak tree out front. I read the news on my iPad, leaning my head on his shoulder. We didn't say much, but it was the most peaceful moment of the day. I had spent my life running from the noise of family. Now I was learning how to live in the quiet of my own making. I stayed in touch with Natalie. She was the only one in the family who didn't try to explain or mediate. She just talked about ordinary things. Her part-time library job, her new boyfriend who played the banjo, and how her roasted cauliflower failed because she mixed up salt with sugar. One Saturday night I asked, "Want to come visit Brooklyn for winter break? I've got a spare room, and my oven is epic." Natalie nearly squealed through the phone. Yes, I'm booking a ticket now. And I'm bringing the right kind of flower. I wasn't expecting much from the visit, but when she walked in and hugged me like I was the only family she had left, I realized something. Real family isn't always built on blood. It's built on the moments you choose to stay. For no reason at all. By spring, I was nominated for the top 50 women in cybersecurity in America. I didn't tell anyone back home. I didn't post it online. I just printed the article, framed it, and hung it next to a photo of me and Andrew in a community garden. Hands dirty, grinning like two kids. The next day, Natalie sent me a screenshot of my mother's Facebook post. My daughter is successful, but she forgot where she came from. I smiled faintly. I hadn't forgotten where I came from. I had just learned not to go back. I don't regret walking away. I don't regret cutting ties. I don't regret stopping the chase for validation that should have been mine from the start. I'm not richer than anyone else. I'm just older than the version of me who once thought silence could make someone love her more. Now, I love myself. I love the life I've built with my own hands. I love the peace of waking up without fear of being called ungrateful, stubborn, or selfish just because I dared to protect myself. I don't need applause for my achievements anymore. I don't need anyone saying my name at family gatherings just to remind everyone I used to be one of them. I only need one thing I never had before: the right to choose who gets to be near me. And I choose the people who respect the quiet in me, instead of suffocating it with empty expectations. I survived my past. Now, I live. Fully. And enough. Alice's story is a powerful reminder that not everyone labeled family deserves your unconditional sacrifice and forgiveness. When kinship becomes an excuse for manipulation, hurt, and entitlement, walking away isn't selfish, it's maturity. In real life, if you've ever been cast aside simply for living differently, remember: you don't need validation from those who once wounded you. True peace begins the moment you choose yourself, without asking for permission, and without regret. What's your take on Alice's decision? Was she too harsh, or was she finally protecting herself after too much pain? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories. I never imagined that the first moment I saw my daughter would also be when my entire world began to collapse. After 20 hours of agonizing labor, I barely had 3 minutes to hold my child before my husband, Tyler, snatched the birth certificate from the nurse's hand. With a cold, emotionless face, he uttered words that left me stunned. "Her name will be Margaret, after my mother, not that ridiculous name you chose." I gripped the edge of the hospital bed, my body still trembling from pain, but his words struck even deeper. I whispered, "No." But Tyler didn't even glance at me. He just smirked and shot me an empty look, as though I didn't exist. Then I heard the nurse standing beside me. Her voice was soft, yet as cold as steel. "Do you want me to tell him the truth?" "My name is Eva, I'm 28 years old and I live in Salem, Oregon. I'd always believed that if love was strong enough, any crack could be healed. But then I realized, some cracks aren't caused by lack of love. They're deliberately made to maintain control." Tyler and I had been married 3 years, after dating for 5. I once thought he was the ideal man: gentle, intelligent, and ambitious. What I didn't see was that his love always had conditions, and that condition was always deferring to his mother, Margaret, the woman whose very shadow hung over our marriage like a curse. Tyler was a classic mama's boy, but I'd convinced myself love would change him. That mistake cost me months of loneliness during my pregnancy, and now this moment, as I lay helpless in a hospital bed, watching the man who vowed to protect me seize control over naming our child as if it were his ultimate victory. I still remember the instant she was born, her eyes barely open, tiny hands curling into mine. I burst into tears. Not from pain, but love. Yet I never expected that love to be one-sided. When the nurse brought the birth certificate, I was struggling to stay awake amid overwhelming exhaustion. Before I could even speak, Tyler jumped up, grabbed the pen, and spoke as if I weren't there. Her name is Margaret, after my mother. No need to ask you. Every word cut deep like a knife. You can't decide alone. I tried to protest weakly. He turned, sneering. You just gave birth, you have no say in anything. My blood froze, and my chest felt crushed under a heavy weight. I wanted to scream, but my body was too weak. Just then, the nurse, a woman in her 50s, hair streaked with gray and eyes sharp, looked at me and leaned in slightly. You want me to tell him the truth? I stared at her blankly, confused. What truth? But her eyes held certainty and anger. She knew something I didn't. The room became unbearably silent. Tyler was still busy writing the name, oblivious to the changed atmosphere. What truth? I whispered. My eyes locked onto the nurse. She glanced at Tyler, then whispered so only I could hear. Not here, but trust me. You need to know, before it's too late. I no longer felt postpartum pain. Not because I was healed, but because fear had overshadowed every physical ache. Tyler had planned this, and I began to suspect he wanted more than just control over our daughter's name. Something darker was at play. I turned to look at my daughter, sleeping peacefully in the cradle beside my bed. She was my only reason for holding on. But if I didn't act now, I might lose her. Not just her name, but to a conspiracy I couldn't yet fully grasp. The nurse gently squeezed my hand, silently promising support. When he leaves the room, I'll tell you. And at that moment, I knew only one thing. Everything I'd trusted could be one perfect lie. I used to think the only disagreements between Tyler and me were about dinner schedules or cleaning chores, but no. Standing between me and my husband was always another woman, Susan, his mother. From the first moment I met Susan at Tyler's grandfather's birthday party, something felt wrong. I was 23, fresh out of college, and she examined me from head to toe with a look like I was a stain on her silk dress. Oh, where do you work again? Oh, just a communications assistant? Susan smiled bitterly, stirring her martini as if she were stirring my self-esteem. I smiled slightly, politely. But deep inside I knew she'd written me off from the very first glance, just because I wasn't from a prestigious family, didn't graduate from an Ivy League school, and, most importantly, I wasn't the daughter of her best friend, the one she'd hoped to marry Tyler. Throughout our relationship, Susan never called me by my name. She called me that girl, or worse, the one with the frizzy hair. At first I tried to endure it. Tyler said his mother was difficult but meant no harm. He always defended her like a good son trying to protect his mother, forgetting that the person he should stand up for was me. My mom just wants what's best for me, Eva. Best, by telling me not to wear red lipstick because I look like a bar waitress? He laughed awkwardly, rubbing my shoulder. She's older, not very tactful. Not tactful? No. She was deliberate. Every word, every glance from her was like a tiny needle, continually stabbing me over the years. When Tyler proposed, I thought things would change. I believed that as his legitimate wife, Susan would finally show me some respect. I was so naive. She went ballistic when she found out Tyler chose my engagement ring himself, a simple platinum band with a deep blue sapphire, my favorite stone since childhood, but to Susan, it was an insult. You didn't ask me first, she hissed upon seeing the ring at dinner at their house. Mom, I thought this stone suited Eva. I chose it because I wanted something special. Susan shot me an icy glare. Special? It looks cheap and gloomy. Wedding rings aren't Halloween jewelry. I wanted to walk away right then, but I sat quietly, gritting my teeth. I loved Tyler, and I foolishly believed, if I was patient enough, she'd accept me. But when we bought our first home, all my illusions shattered. Susan criticized our neighborhood for being full of Chinese food smells, calling our small house a matchbox for mice. On moving day, she appeared with 3 bags. Not gifts, but to stay for 3 days. Because she was worried Tyler couldn't arrange furniture alone. I vividly remember her standing in my bedroom, flinging open my closet and saying, "My son deserves someone with better taste." Tyler just stood there, laughing it off as if his mother had cracked a joke. "Mom, come on." I waited for him to side with me, just once. But no. Whenever I objected, Tyler used the same excuse. "You know how my mom is. She loves me, she's just afraid of losing me." I cried one night when Susan called at 1 a.m., just to tell me I should get liposuction after giving birth if I didn't want Tyler to lose interest. I thought Tyler would be furious at her boundary-crossing phone call. But no. He sighed wearily. "You're overreacting." When I became pregnant, things got 100 times worse. Susan insisted on controlling every decision. What I ate, which doctor I chose, even the color of the nursery. I wanted to name our daughter Luna, a name I had adored since childhood. Tyler initially agreed, but after dinner at his mother's one evening, he turned to me, coldly. "I think Margaret sounds better. It's a family tradition." I stared at him, stunned. No one asked me, no one cared what I wanted. And now, lying here in this stark white hospital room, my daughter barely an hour old, Tyler stood there, smirking as if he'd won some petty game. "Her name is Margaret, you have no say." The nurse stood quietly by my bed, eyes cautious. I had the feeling she'd witnessed scenes like this more than once. And when she leaned in and asked me gently, "Do you want me to tell him the truth?" I realized things were worse than I'd ever imagined. Tyler wasn't just a coward hiding behind his mother. Perhaps he was also a traitor. And I would not stay silent anymore. Pregnancy is exhausting enough, but pregnancy under the suffocating supervision of a woman who wants to control even your breathing? That's hell. I found out I was pregnant one March morning, just as spring began in Oregon. The 2 red lines on the test made my heart leap inside my chest. I cried. Not out of fear, but happiness. I imagined Tyler holding me tight, cherishing my growing belly like a treasure. But reality was different. Tyler stood there, staring at the pregnancy test like it was an electric bill. He didn't hug me. Didn't say anything for the first 10 seconds. Then he finally spoke, his tone flat. "Okay, I'll tell Mom." I froze. Not, "We're going to be parents," but, "I'll tell Mom." I should have realized at that very moment that from now on, this wasn't about Tyler and me. It was about Susan and me. 3 days later, she appeared at our house with a thick folder and a meal plan pinned together with a red clip. "This was my diet when I was pregnant with Tyler," she said, as if it were the Bible. I glanced through it, not a single line about fresh vegetables or fruits, just red meat, whole milk and deep-fried foods. "I gave birth to a perfect son, you should be grateful I'm sharing my secrets." I swallowed my frustration. "My doctor recommended I eat lightly, with lots of fruits and vegetables." "Which doctor?" she interrupted, eyes narrowing. Before I could reply, she turned to Tyler. "You're not planning to let her go to one of those cheap Medicaid clinics, are you?" Tyler didn't speak, he just nodded stiffly. That night, he handed me a list of 3 obstetricians his mother had already chosen. I looked at him, bitterly. "Tyler, I already have my own doctor. She's been monitoring my health for over a year." He sighed, as if I were making trouble. "Mom's just trying to help, stop being so sensitive." I began to feel trapped. Susan came by 3 times a week, unannounced. She checked the fridge, criticizing every meal I cooked. Once she even threw a box of strawberries into the trash, claiming cold fruits cause uterine contractions. "If you want my grandchild born prematurely, keep eating that garbage." I was going crazy. But Tyler took her side again. "Mom is just worried about you, Eva. You need to understand that." "Understand?" Oh. I understood perfectly. Susan wasn't worried about me. she was manipulating my entire pregnancy as if I were just an incubator, and the baby was the only product she cared about. 6 months into the pregnancy, I started having strange dreams. In them, I was running from a burning house, holding a child, while Susan screamed from behind, "Give me back my grandchild, she's not yours!" I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my back drenched in sweat, turning to look at Tyler. He slept soundly, facing away from me. We no longer embraced. We no longer talked like we used to. Tyler became coldly distant. He came home late, spoke less, and often avoided eye contact. When I confronted him, he snapped. "You're paranoid because of your hormones." I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a baby-making machine, being controlled remotely from Susan's living room. When I suggested naming our child Luna, Tyler frowned. "That name sounds childish. Mom doesn't like it." "This is my child too, not just your mom's," I said through gritted teeth. He snapped back. "If it weren't for my mother, I wouldn't be who I am. You should be grateful to her." Everything peaked at week 34, when I went alone to a prenatal checkup, because Tyler was busy in meetings. The doctor discovered my blood pressure had spiked, warning of potential preeclampsia. I came home, terrified, and told Tyler. He stared at me, then asked, "Did you eat something Mom warned you to avoid?" I exploded. "Did you even hear what I said? My life could be in danger, and your first thought is that I didn't listen to your mom?" He was silent, cold. No hug, no reassurance. At that moment, I knew our marriage had cracked, not because of infidelity, but because I had become nothing in my husband's eyes except a shadow beside his mother. I counted down each day to my due date, not out of excitement for my child's arrival but because I desperately wanted to escape the controlling grip tightening around my throat. But I never imagined that the day I awaited would become the day all secrets began to unravel. I never thought I'd have to fight for my right to motherhood. Right here in the hospital, just hours after giving birth. My body was still trembling from 20 grueling hours of labor. I lay there, head spinning, eyelids heavy, hands weakly clutching hospital sheets that still smelled of blood and antiseptic. But instead of holding my daughter in my arms, I watched Tyler, the husband I once trusted, quietly stand up, snatch the birth certificate form from the nurse's hands, and begin writing, as if I didn't exist. "Name, Margaret Quinn," he read aloud in a firm voice, without even bothering to ask my opinion. I struggled to sit up, pain slicing through my body. "Tyler, stop, we agreed on Luna." He didn't even turn around. "You're not clear-headed enough to decide right now, get some rest." At that moment, the nurse, Maggie, a middle-aged woman with eyes sharp as razor blades, stepped firmly between us. She took back the documents from Tyler, gripping them tightly, her expression stern. "I need to confirm the identity of both parents before completing these papers." Tyler frowned. "I'm the child's father. That's enough." Maggie didn't back down. "And I need confirmation from her as the mother. You can't unilaterally fill this out." I clearly saw Tyler's face shift. From confidence to uncertainty. Then embarrassment. He swallowed hard, glancing nervously at me. Instinct told me something was very wrong. Weakly I whispered to the nurse. "You mentioned earlier, there was a truth I should know?" She didn't answer immediately, instead, holding my gaze for a long moment, before leaning in and whispering. "There's something unusual about the insurance paperwork. You need to check it now, before it's too late." I tried to shift my body, the pain from my episiotomy incision stabbing like a knife. Tyler stepped forward, his voice tense. "No need to cause a scene here. You need rest. I'll handle the paperwork." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Tyler, what did you do?" He clenched his fists, sweat glistening on his forehead. "I just rearranged some details, you wouldn't understand." "Then explain it so I can understand," I said, each word sharp, never taking my eyes off him. Maggie stepped aside, arms crossed. "I can bring you the insurance records right now, if you wish." Tyler suddenly snapped. "She just gave birth, can't you see that? This isn't the time. No, this is exactly the time, I replied, my voice no longer trembling. I want to see the records. Tyler laughed bitterly, eyes darting around anxiously. This is ridiculous. You're doubting your own husband? Yes, I answered without hesitation. Minutes later, the nurse returned with a thick folder. She flipped through each page in silence, until stopping at the line labeled primary parent. I held my breath. The only name listed, Tyler Quinn. Not mine. Not a single line. Not a single word. I went numb. My entire body went cold. You removed my name from the records? I asked, barely believing my own ears. Tyler lunged forward to snatch the documents, but Maggie quickly pulled them back. No, this is evidence. I didn't mean it like that, Tyler protested. I was just trying to keep things clear, less complicated. I leaned back, clutching my stomach. Less complicated? He called removing me from motherhood less complicated? You planned to take my child from me? No, I just thought if something happened, then... I screamed. If I died during childbirth? Is that the something you were counting on? He stammered. You don't understand. My mother, she said, the lawyer advised. I laughed bitterly, a laugh so cold it frightened even me. Ah, Susan again. Your mother had her hand in this, didn't she? Nurse Maggie gently placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, I'll report this to hospital management, and to your attorney if needed. Tyler stepped backward. His eyes had lost their confidence, they trembled. He looked at me as if, for the first time, he no longer held control. I wasn't trying to steal our child. I just thought, if you left me, I needed a way to hold on to something. I stared directly into his eyes. I'm not an object, neither is my child, and you won't be holding on to anything. Maggie nodded at me. We'll redo the paperwork. Your name will be listed in full as the legal mother, and I'll document all of this in the records. I nodded, tears pouring out, not from pain, but anger. Tyler had planned to erase me from my own child's life. Without the nurse's help, I might never have found out. At that moment, Tyler's phone rang. I glanced over. Caller ID, Susan. And I knew he wasn't alone in this scheme. Susan's call lasted just seconds, but it was the key that opened the gates of hell wide. Tyler didn't answer. He saw her name flashing on the screen and immediately hit decline, but I'd seen, and knew he was hiding something. His expression wasn't anger or confusion, it was panic. I gripped the hospital blanket tighter, my postpartum incision throbbing, but the burning inside me hurt 100 times worse. Tell me, Tyler, I want to hear you admit it, your mother's involved in this, isn't she? He breathed rapidly, avoiding my eyes. But I saw his fingers trembling as he tried to shove the phone into his pocket. Nurse Maggie stood nearby, arms folded, her gaze piercing straight through his weak defenses. I'll ask you again, one final time, did your mother orchestrate this? I practically screamed. Tyler looked at me and finally broke. Mom just wanted to help me. To be prepared, just in case. In case what? I left? I demanded custody? My voice cracked. You planned to remove me from our daughter's life? Just in case? Tyler sank into the chair beside my bed, his face drained of all color. He loosened his tie, repeatedly rubbing his forehead like someone cornered. My mother hired a lawyer, he began, voice hoarse. She said if you left, you'd use the child to trap me, to get revenge. I went numb. I never gave you any reason to think I'd do that. He didn't answer. So you just followed everything she said? Signed documents, altered insurance paperwork? Put only your name on the birth certificate? He nodded slightly. I saw clearly in his eyes, not regret, but fear of being caught. As long as you didn't know, everything would be fine. Mom's lawyer said courts usually side with whoever has documentation ready. You don't earn as much as I do. If we divorced, I'd have the advantage. I choked back tears. So you erased my name from every document. You made me a stranger to my own daughter because of Money and lawyers? Because my mother said it was the only way to protect me. I felt my heart skip a beat. And what's the real motive? I fixed my eyes on him, determined to pierce through his final mask. He stayed silent, but I wouldn't let go. Tell me, Tyler, why does your mother hate me enough to take away my right to motherhood? He leaned forward, bracing himself against some invisible pressure. Because you never respected her. I laughed, a dry, hollow laugh that silenced the room. Never respected her? I tolerated every insult, every time she barged into our home uninvited, every dinner where she called me the housemaid with a degree. I stayed silent for 3 years, and what do I get in return? A legal trap? She said you were trying to drive us apart. She couldn't accept you rejecting the name Margaret. She said if you didn't respect our family, you didn't deserve to raise my child. I felt like someone was strangling me. And you? What do you think? I asked, my voice low. Tyler looked away. I don't know. No, you do know. You know exactly. But you chose to listen to her. You chose to deceive me. You betrayed me while I was pregnant with our daughter. I was no longer crying. My anger had surpassed the pain. Maggie spoke up, her voice as hard as steel. We'll redo all the paperwork. Eva will be the legal guardian. The old records will be sealed pending investigation for fraud. Tyler shot to his feet. No! You're destroying my family. I looked at him, eyes cold as ice. You destroyed it, Tyler, no one else. Right then the door burst open. Sophie, my older sister, rushed in. Eva, are you all right? I nodded but kept my eyes locked on Tyler. Sophie glanced at him, then back at me, suspicion in her gaze. What's going on here? I didn't answer. I said only one thing. Voice firm as stone. Call the lawyer, right now. Just as Sophie finished calling the lawyer, Tyler's phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Susan. Another name flashed clearly on the screen. Brielle, with a red heart emoji beside it. I saw Sophie glance quickly, her expression changing instantly. Who is Brielle? She asked through clenched teeth. Tyler panicked, trying to shove the phone back into his pocket, but Sophie was faster. She snatched it away right in front of him, said nothing else, and unlocked it with his fingerprint. I remained seated on the hospital bed, clutching my daughter, feeling as though someone had sucked all the air from my lungs. I knew Tyler was hiding something, but I never imagined that. Oh my God! Sophie gasped, her voice shattering in shock. I swallowed hard. What is it? She turned the screen toward me. And I saw it. Messages, an entire thread. A conversation filled with innuendo, flirtation and cruelty that made me nauseous. I can't wait until she's gone so we can finally be together. After the baby's born, everything will be fine. Mom said as long as I have the paperwork, she can't claim any rights. She'll be left with nothing. She'll have no choice but to leave. My hands trembled violently. You're having an affair? I stared straight into Tyler's eyes, but he looked away. Sophie continued scrawling. Eva, I think you need to see this. She stopped at a message with a photo. I looked. And my heart exploded. It was Brielle, the daughter of Nancy Wilkins, Susan's best friend. She'd been to our house a few times, always complimenting Tyler for being such a respectable man, and often texting him about his work projects. I had naively assumed it was just polite conversation. Brielle wore a thin nightgown taking a selfie in bed, accompanied by the words, "Tonight, I wish you were the one lying next to me instead of her." I could barely breathe. I was pregnant and you were with someone else? Tyler reached out his hand as if trying to calm me down. Eva, listen to me, it's not what you think. Not what I think? I screamed, my voice echoing in the sterile white room. You secretly planned to take custody, removed my name from the insurance, and plotted with your mistress to erase me from your life? And you dare say it's not what I think? Sophie threw the phone onto the bed, her eyes blazing. You're a piece of trash, Tyler. Eva just gave birth. She hasn't even recovered yet, and you do this? Tyler hissed back. You don't understand. Eva, she never respected my mother. From day one, she looked down on her. So you erased me from my own daughter's life to replace me with a mistress chosen by your mother? I whispered, my voice quiet but filled with rage. Riel understands my mother better than you do. She respects tradition. She's willing to share everything for the common good. I laughed bitterly. No, she's willing to share you. But me? I sacrificed my career, my body, my mental health. For what? To be betrayed when I'm at my weakest? Tyler took a step forward, his eyes guilty like a child caught in a lie. I never meant for things to go this far. I was just stuck between the two most important women in my life? Sophie tilted her chin, coldly. Wrong. There are three. Your mother, your mistress, and your wife who just gave birth. And you chose to remove the only one who never betrayed you. Tyler had nothing left to say. He lowered his head, arms limp, as if every excuse had turned to dust. I slowly placed my daughter into the bassinet beside me, then climbed out of bed. Even as the incision burned painfully, I walked straight up to Tyler, looking him directly in the eyes, each word slicing like a blade. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed this child too. And I swear, Tyler Quinn, I'll never let you or your mother come near her again. Not as long as I'm alive. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but I'd already turned away. I didn't need explanations from someone who'd gladly sacrifice his wife for twisted loyalty to his mother and cheap personal desires. Sophie turned to Maggie. We need a lawyer, and complete medical records, documenting everything. Maggie nodded immediately. I'll contact the legal department, and Eva? She turned toward me, her eyes softening. You're not alone. We'll ensure you have all the evidence you need to protect your daughter. I glanced at my sleeping daughter, her tiny face pink and peaceful, lips curled like a little angel. I leaned down, gently kissing her forehead, whispering, I'll protect you, at all costs. I never imagined a birth certificate could make my heart twist so painfully. That document, cold, white, merciless, declared, Eva doesn't exist. Not a mother. Not the creator of the precious life sleeping in the cradle beside me, just a shadow crossed out. I walked toward the table, trembling with pain from the incision and fury. Tyler watched me cautiously, as though afraid I'd do something reckless. He said, Eva, calm down. We can deal with this later. I didn't respond. I picked up the birth certificate, held it up in front of him, then tore it cleanly in half. No hesitation, no blinking. Nothing gets dealt with later. You chose to erase me from my daughter's life. Today, I choose to fight back. Tyler froze in shock. Sophie nodded, as though seeing daylight after a storm. Nurse Maggie tightened her lips, silently collecting the remaining paperwork, like a soldier prepared to defend the final line. I turned to Maggie. I want to redo all the paperwork, with my name, with the truth. She nodded firmly. You'll be the first to sign, and this time, no one will remove you from your rightful place as a mother. The click of heels echoed in the hallway. I turned, my heart instantly turning cold. Susan. She strode into the room as though entering a board meeting, her gaze sweeping over each of us like she was appraising personal property. Her hair was neatly styled, her lips painted dark red, and disdain radiated from every step. I heard there was some trouble, she said, her voice gentle but dripping with sarcasm. Tyler looked at his mother like a child caught stealing candy. Susan glanced at the torn birth certificate on the table, her lips tightening. Ava, she began, trying to appear patient. You're making a mess. This child needs stability. She needs someone sensible. I laughed bitterly. Sensible? You mean someone who keeps quiet, looks the other way, and lets you and your son erase my legal rights as a mother? Susan shrugged casually, as though discussing curtain choices. You don't understand. You're weak, emotionally unstable. You're not fit to raise a child. Sophie stepped forward, blocking her path. You have no right to say that. Eva gave birth less than a day ago, and you're already trying to take her child. Susan glared at Sophie, then turned back to me. You have no money, no status, no support. Tyler is the only one who can guarantee a good future for this baby. I stepped closer to her, each step steady despite the lingering pain. I have something you'll never have. Genuine love for her, not control, not ambition. Tyler stood between Susan and me, his gaze flickering nervously, face pale like someone suddenly exposed to harsh light. I stared directly at him. Now's the moment for you to choose. Your family, or the truth. Your mother, or your daughter having both. Her parents. Susan cut in sharply. Tyler, don't listen to her. I've sacrificed my entire life to get you here. Don't betray me for a woman who doesn't know her place. Tyler staggered back. I expected him to bow his head, to give in again. But this time, his gaze fell on Luna, our daughter, sleeping peacefully in her crib. For the first time, his eyes softened, his shoulders dropped. Mom, he whispered, choking up. I can't do this anymore. Susan spun around. What? I was wrong. It went too far. I didn't think Eva would ever find out, but now I know. What truly matters? She shouted. Tyler, are you throwing everything away for a moment of weakness? He turned toward me. I'm sorry. I didn't forgive him, but at least I knew I'd just won the most important battle of my life. Not because Tyler suddenly woke up, but because I was no longer afraid of them. Susan gripped her handbag tightly, her eyes blazing. You'll regret this. She'll destroy your life, she'll make you a failure. Tyler lowered his head, for the first time not fighting her, but for the first time not obeying her either. Susan turned sharply, storming out, leaving behind a room heavy with shattered pieces. I watched her leave, then turned to Nurse Maggie. Now we start again. This time, with the truth. With my name legally recognized as Luna's mother. Maggie smiled gently. We'll follow every procedure correctly. And no one will erase you again. I signed my name on the new birth certificate with hands still swollen from childbirth. But my heart was lighter than it had ever been since entering this marriage. Beneath the words, Mother Eva Morgan Quinn, everything stolen from me was finally restored. No more false names, no more schemes. No more invisible control Susan had wielded around my neck like a rope. It ended here. But rebuilding my life? That was just beginning. After that day, everything happened faster than I expected. Maggie, the nurse who'd stood beside me from the start, became the witness, providing all necessary documentation to the family lawyer Sophie had called. Those detailed records, documenting every illegal action Tyler committed, from falsifying insurance documents to deliberately removing my name from the birth certificate, became the blade that cut through any chance he had of fighting back. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Tyler wasn't there. Susan wasn't waiting. Only Sophie, my sister, who stood by me like a wall when the rest of the world turned away. We went to her house in South Salem, where Luna and I would stay temporarily while the lawyer handled the divorce. Tyler called, repeatedly, texted, emailed, sometimes begging, sometimes blaming. He said it was a mistake, that his mother had manipulated him, that he never really intended to erase me from our daughter's life. I didn't respond. Because if there's one thing I learned after everything that happened, it's this. No one can destroy you unless you allow them to cross your boundaries. The divorce was finalized within 2 months. Thanks to the evidence gathered at the hospital, along with testimony from Maggie and Sophie, the court granted me full custody of Luna. Tyler was allowed visitation rights, but only supervised, and he never once dared show up after the verdict. I heard Brielle left him. She disappeared without explanation as soon as she realized Tyler wouldn't get custody or a share of assets, since our marriage records showed clear signs of abuse. As for Susan, she called once, her voice calm, still trying to use her model mother-in-law tone as though nothing had happened. Ava, we both made mistakes, but Luna is still my granddaughter. I hope you can understand and forgive. I smiled softly. I forgive you, but you'll never see her again. I blocked her number immediately afterward, and blocked all of Tyler's relatives too. I didn't need false sympathy from people who stood silently while I cried out helplessly. 6 months later, I officially changed my daughter's surname, Luna Morgan, no longer carrying the name of the man who tried to erase her mother's existence. I rented a small apartment near downtown, close to daycare and my new workplace. The job wasn't glamorous, just an internal communications position at a real estate company. But I did it well. I made money. I raised my child with my own 2 hands, and dignity no one could ever strip away. Each morning I dressed Luna in tiny clothes, kissed her forehead, and saw clearly in her eyes something I thought I'd lost. I was still tired, still had nights when Luna cried endlessly, when I couldn't sleep, moments when I was so exhausted that I just wanted to sit on the floor and cry. But I had no regrets. I chose my daughter, I chose myself, and that was the best decision of my life. One afternoon, when I picked Luna up from daycare, her teacher handed me a messy drawing. A colorful picture, a mother holding a little girl, surrounded by blue sky and bright sunlight. The teacher said, Luna said this is her mommy. She said mommy is her protector. I held the drawing, my throat tight. Yes, I protected her, from the very person I once thought would raise her alongside me. Now, as I stand by my apartment window, looking out at the city lights, I no longer see darkness. I'm no longer the Eva who trembled, begging her husband to see her as a human being. I'm Eva Morgan, a mother, a woman betrayed to her core but who stood up again, head held high. And if someone ever asks me if I forgive Tyler, I'll say this. I don't need to forgive anyone. I just need to live a life of my own choosing. Eva's story is a powerful reminder that not everyone who wears the cloak of family has good intentions. When people exploit family ties to manipulate, betray, and strip away a mother's rights, silence is no longer a virtue, it's surrender. Eva chose to stand up, protecting herself and her daughter, despite pain, despite loneliness. She showed that women are stronger than many assume, and sometimes, the bravest act is simply walking away and starting again, for your child, and for yourself. What do you think about Eva's story and her courageous choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more real-life emotional stories and profound lessons about family. Her words sliced through the thick layers of doubt that had wrapped around my heart for so long. That night, I stayed up editing my resume, writing cover letters, practicing interviews, and reading everything I could about Maxwell. I didn't sleep, but I didn't feel tired. For the first time in a long, long while, I felt alive. On interview day, I walked into Maxwell's office, floors gleaming with white marble, windows stretching up to the sky, reflecting the sharply dressed professionals striding confidently inside. Me, in a hastily rented gray suit, a misfit among the polished crowd. But I held my head high. I wasn't here to beg, I was here to prove. The interview lasted almost 2 hours. They fired every tough question imaginable. Investment strategies, risk management, macroeconomic analysis. Every time I answered, I repeated to myself, I've come this far. There's no turning back. 1 week later, while folding laundry in my cramped apartment, my phone rang. Olivia Evans, a deep male voice asked. Yes. We are pleased to offer you a position as an investment analyst at Maxwell Investment Group. Congratulations. I collapsed onto my bed, unable to hold back the tears. But these were tears of triumph. The early days at Maxwell were pure hell. Crippling pressure, endless late hours, thick stacks of reports, demanding clients. Many times, I thought I would break. But every time I wanted to quit, I thought about the cabin my grandparents sold for me. I thought about the cold eyes of my mother in Madison that night. And I hurled myself into the work like a moth into flame, While my colleagues left for home at 5 p.m., I stayed until 10 p.m. When they gathered at bars on weekends, I sat alone in my room, analyzing markets, studying new investment strategies. When I was assigned a small portfolio for a startup tech company, I seized the opportunity like a starving person grabbing bread. 3 months later, the portfolio's value increased by 35%. A number that made the entire Maxwell office take notice? Olivia, the way you turned that messy portfolio around is truly impressive, my department head said, his eyes full of genuine recognition. I think you have what it takes to go far. The first promotion came after a year, along with a bonus I had only ever dreamed about. I spent that first bonus buying a car, not a flashy sports car, but a luxurious SUV, strong enough to take my grandparents on weekend drives whenever they wanted. The day I drove the new car home, they stood in the front yard. Their faces a mix of bewilderment and pride. Grandpa chuckled hoarsely. Our granddaughter's driving a fancy car now, huh? I just smiled and hugged them tightly. No words were needed. They knew, and so did I. 2 years after stepping into Maxwell, I signed a contract to purchase a penthouse apartment on the 28th floor of a newly opened building downtown. The apartment measured 1,800 square feet, with floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the glittering Hudson River. On the day I signed the contract, I stood in the empty space, my hand trembling as it touched the cold glass. I did this on my own, I whispered. No handouts. No loans. No one could take this victory away from me. I hung a picture of my grandparents and me on the very first wall, a permanent reminder that I was never truly alone. Then, on a gloomy autumn morning, as I stepped out of the elevator, I ran into a familiar face right outside the building. Madison. She stood there in Lululemon gym clothes holding a smoothie, her mouth dropping open when she saw me. Olivia! She gasped as if seeing a ghost. I smiled, slowly lifting my cup of hot coffee, and replied casually, Hey Madison, I live here. I pointed upward, to the top floor where my penthouse was located. In that moment, for the first time in my life, I saw raw envy flash across my sister's eyes. I thought that after running into Madison outside the building, the chapter between me and my family would finally close. But I was wrong. And as always, they managed to make things worse. One late evening at the end of March, while reading financial news under the warm golden lights of my living room, my phone rang. Seeing Mom flash on the screen, I froze for a few seconds. All these years, she had never reached out first. Part of me wanted to hit ignore, but curiosity won. I picked up. Olivia, hi sweetheart. My mother's voice was syrupy sweet, so fake it made my skin crawl. Hi Mom, I replied coolly. Wow, hearing your voice makes me so happy. Your father and I were just around your area, wondering if we could stop by for a little visit. Around, stop by? I squinted at the screen. Something smelled fishy. But, fine, I wanted to hear what they were scheming. Sure, I answered flatly. Come over. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there stood my parents, oddly polished and neatly dressed. Mom's eyes swept quickly across my living room, lingering on the Italian leather sofa and the glass walls with sweeping city views. You're living really well, she said, unable to hide her mix of surprise and jealousy. I smirked. Come in. They sat down stiffly, like people about to negotiate a high-stakes deal. I sat across from them, arms crossed, waiting. Olivia? My father cleared his throat. The thing is, Madison is getting married to Nathan. I nodded. I know. Mom immediately chimed in, voice dripping honey. We promised Nathan's family that we'd cover half of the wedding costs. But the expenses have gone higher than we expected. I blinked slowly. I could already guess the next words. The total cost is about $300,000, Mom continued, her face slightly flushed. We need about $150,000 to cover our share. The room fell into dead silence, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, I tilted my head, staring straight at them. "So you're here to ask me for money?" "Not ask," Dad waved his hands frantically. Just a loan. We'll do up proper papers. We'll pay back everything." I almost laughed out loud. "A loan?" I sneered. "Like the loan I begged you for when I wanted to go to college? When I offered to sign an official contract with interest?" Mom's face immediately darkened. "Olivia, don't dig up the past," she snapped. I leaned forward, my voice as cold as steel. "The past is the only thing that shows us who was truly family, and who just used me as a tool." Dad fidgeted with his tie awkwardly. Mom sighed heavily, switching to a pleading tone. "You're doing so well now, you could easily help. Are you really going to let Madison be humiliated in front of Nathan's family?" I leaned back, arms folded across my chest. "When I needed help to go to college," I said slowly, each word cutting like a knife, "you told me I wasn't worth investing in." I smirked, voice icy. "So now, sorry, I don't see why I should invest in a lavish wedding I'm not even invited to." Mom's face turned crimson as she shot up from her seat. "Olivia Evans, you ungrateful brat." I stood up calmly, walking straight to the door, yanking open the heavy glass panel. "Please leave my apartment," I said coldly. My father stood up, awkwardly pulling my mother along. "You'll regret this," my mother screamed before disappearing behind the slamming door. I stood there in silence, listening to their footsteps fade down the hallway. No more tears. No more pain. Only a cold, brilliant peace, like sunlight piercing through ice. That night, I stood by the glass window, staring at the distant lights across the river. A chapter had closed. And I finally had full control to write the rest of my story without those who had belittled, drained, or used me. I took a sip of red wine and smiled. Madison would have her wedding. My family would go on pretending I never existed. And me? I would keep moving forward, proud, without ever looking back. I thought after throwing my parents out of my apartment it would be the end. I was wrong. They didn't just knock on my door. They knocked on the whole town's. Just a few weeks later, the rumor started spreading like wildfire in a dry season. From the corner grocery store to the church where my grandparents still attended, whispers floated everywhere, so absurd I had to laugh at their shamelessness. "Olivia Evans? She got rich and forgot her family. Fifth girl lives in a fancy penthouse now and treats her parents like trash. Did you hear? She even kicked her own mother out of her house." I heard it all. While standing in line at the supermarket, walking through the park, even attending church services. Their eyes followed me, cold, judgmental, as if I were a wayward, ungrateful child. I knew exactly who was behind it all. None other than my mother and Madison. In their eyes, if they couldn't control me, they would destroy my reputation. One Friday evening while having dinner with my grandparents in the warm little kitchen, Grandpa set down his fork and looked at me, heavily. "Olivia, we know everything," he said. I looked up, the bread in my mouth suddenly tasting like dust. "Your parents," Grandma hesitated, then sighed. "They've been telling everyone you turned your back on your family for money." I gripped my fork tighter, but my voice stayed calm. "I know." Grandpa placed his hand over mine and squeezed. "You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. The people who truly know you, they'll understand." I smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "I don't intend to explain anything, Grandpa," I whispered. "I no longer have time for those who aren't worth it." From that day on, I chose silence. I didn't argue. I didn't confront. I didn't defend myself. I let the rumors swirl around me like toxic wind, blowing past, fading on their own. Because I understood, answering them would only fuel the fire. Instead, I poured my energy into work, into growing investment portfolios, into peaceful dinners with my grandparents, into the freedom I had earned through years of painful sacrifice. One Saturday afternoon, while sitting in my favorite cafe reading market reports, Lisa, my old college friend, texted me, "Have you heard? Madison and her family are bad-mouthing you everywhere. But don't worry, a lot of people aren't buying it." I smirked, typing back, "Thanks, I'm fine." A week later, I received an email from the company. I was nominated for the position of senior investment manager. A step I had never dared to dream would come so soon. I threw myself into work even more fiercely, proving myself through results, through growing profits, through handshakes and nods of respect at board meetings. With each new stone I laid for my future, the rumors around me grew smaller, more irrelevant. One evening, sitting with my grandparents under the porch roof, gazing at a sky ablaze with stars, Grandma gently said, "You know, Olivia, people can only talk behind your back when they can't reach you." I nodded, biting my lip to stop tears from falling. Grandpa added, his voice deep and warm, "You chose the hardest road. Not hating, not retaliating. And that's the greatest victory of all." The breeze blew softly across the porch, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the sweet pride that hung quietly between us. I leaned my head against Grandma's shoulder, closing my eyes, letting myself be wrapped in pure peace. The town still buzzed with gossip, but I no longer really heard it. I was busy preparing strategic presentations for the board of directors. I spent weekends taking my grandparents to parks, visiting small fairs, savoring quiet dinners, without caring about anyone's stares. Every time I closed a big investment deal, I secretly rewarded myself. Not with luxury goods, but with simple joys. A good book, a long hike, a silent dinner filled with true happiness. My parents and Madison continued playing their games, trying to drag me back into the old swamp. But this time, I was no longer little Olivia. I was the author of my own story. And in that story, they were just minor characters. Faded, outdated, powerless. News of Madison's wedding spread quickly through town, like every other event our family had once tried so hard to inflate. But this time, what spread even faster were the whispered criticisms they couldn't control. I wasn't invited. And even if I had been, I never would have shown up. That day, while the entire town flocked to the big church to attend the event of the century my family had bragged about for months, I sat quietly in my penthouse apartment, sipping a hot cup of coffee, the window open to welcome the cool morning breeze. Sarah, the only close friend I had left from college, texted me during the ceremony. "You won't believe it. Everything's falling apart." I set my cup down, a strange sense of anticipation rising inside me. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Sarah's voice buzzed with excitement. "Turns out Nathan's family found out your parents couldn't cover their promised share. Nathan's mother nearly called off the wedding on the spot." I leaned back in my chair, smirking. According to Sarah, Nathan and his family had been bombarded by calls from the caterers, florists, and event planners, because my parents had failed to pay their part. In the end, to save face, the groom's side had to cough up the full amount, but the resentment couldn't be hidden. In all the wedding photos later posted on social media, Madison smiled, but it was stiff and painfully fake. My parents, dressed in brand new outfits, stood awkwardly at the edges of the frames, like forgotten decorations. Those photos quickly spread, accompanied by the very whispers they once hurled at me. "This family looks rich, but it's all just empty show." Once again, the masks they wore for years were ripped away, under the cold scrutiny of the very society they once longed to impress. I didn't attend the wedding. I didn't send a gift. Not even a congratulatory message. Instead, I spent that day with my grandparents, sipping herbal tea in the backyard, and listening to Grandpa retell stories of long-ago summers. No one mentioned Madison. No one mentioned the lavish yet hollow wedding taking place just a few miles away. We chose peace. And for me, that was the greatest gift. A few weeks later, I heard rumors that Madison and Nathan had moved into a small suburban house, purchased by Nathan's family, My parents were no longer welcome at the family gatherings they had once desperately hoped to be part of. My mother, who once bragged about becoming a distinguished mother-in-law, now received only cold glances and subtle indifference. Sarah updated me occasionally, but I didn't care much. I was busy living the life I had fought so hard to build. My career at Maxwell continued to thrive. The portfolios I managed kept outperforming expectations, bringing me closer to an executive-level position. Every weekend, I drove back to my grandparents' little house, bringing small gifts, a bouquet of fresh flowers, dishes I learned from the city, or simply stories that made the three of us laugh until our sides hurt. No luxury needed. No applause required. Just a place, arms open wide, where I truly belonged. One October evening, standing on my penthouse balcony, gazing at the city lights sprawling below, I whispered to myself, I don't need revenge. I just need to live well. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't retaliation or making others suffer. It's proving they have no power over you anymore. They can say what they want. They can weave hundreds of slanderous stories. But if they can't take away the peace in my heart, they can't touch what I've built with my own hands. Never again. That night, before going to sleep, I texted Sarah. Thank you for always being there. I'm really okay. I'm free. My phone buzzed almost immediately. I'm so proud of you, Olivia. You deserve every bit of happiness you've carved out. I smiled and turned off the lights. A soft smile, free of bitterness, free of resentment. Only peace. Peace. The precious gift I fought my whole scarred childhood to achieve. And I swore I would never lose it again. Olivia's story reminds us that not everyone born into our family is truly family. Sometimes, betrayal and belittlement come from those who should have loved us unconditionally. But beyond the pain, Olivia proved that self-worth doesn't come from others' approval. It comes from perseverance and belief in yourself. Cutting off toxic relationships isn't a failure, it's the beginning of a life of freedom, peace, and true worth. What do you think about Olivia's journey? Would you have the strength to walk away from unworthy relationships like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories. Everyone thought my family was perfect. A 2-story house in the suburbs of New Hampshire, my dad's cozy little cafe, and family photos of beaming smiles covering the walls. But if anyone ever asked me about my childhood, I could only smile and stay silent, because the truth was nothing like those pretty pictures. The favoritism in my family wasn't subtle, it was paraded around like a trophy. And I, Olivia Evans, was just the faint shadow behind my sister Madison's blinding light. Madison was exactly 2 years older than me, but from the beginning, the gap between us was more than just numbers. If Madison was the sun, I was forever the forgotten shadow. I still remember vividly the night I was 8 years old. Madison had just returned from a school piano recital, and the whole house erupted with pride. Mom brought out a cake, Dad popped open non-alcoholic champagne, and relatives called non-stop to congratulate her. I stood silently in the corner, still clutching the second-place art contest painting I had won at school. No one asked. No one looked. My certificate flipped face down on the table from a stray breeze, just like my presence in this house, unnoticed. Every birthday of Madison's was a grand event. Mom would hire a party planner with balloons and a giant cake, and me? If I was lucky, I got a rushed supermarket cake with the word "Congratulations" scrawled messily on it. I still remember my 10th birthday. I even had to share the party with Madison, for convenience. Mom said it like it was a privilege, but deep down I knew I was never meant to have anything just for myself. Madison always had the best. When she turned 14, my parents bought her the latest iPhone. I inherited her old cracked one. Madison wore Abercrombie and Fitch. I stumbled through life in patched-up hand-me-downs. Don't complain, Olivia, Mom would say coldly. You should be grateful for what you have. At every family gathering, the moment Madison spoke, all eyes would turn to her. Academic awards, trophies, club leaderships. Madison's achievements were retold like legends. I sat by the food tray, quietly chewing stale bread, wondering if anyone even remembered the name of the tiny environmental club I'd joined. It wasn't that I did poorly. I maintained a steady B average, participated in activities, and even won third place in a district debate contest. But in my parents' eyes, everything I did was just average. Okay. Try harder. Olivia. That phrase, try harder, followed me through every year of my childhood like a dull, aching wound that never healed. One evening, while I was folding laundry for Mom, she casually dropped a comment like a knife to the heart. Olivia, you should consider something practical. Retail work or waitressing is honorable too. I forced a smile, finishing folding my worn-out blouse, but inside me, something cracked. No one asked what I wanted. No one thought I had dreams. To them, I should just be grateful to exist beside Madison, the family's precious gem. Even now, I remember those nights when Madison was away at piano lessons and I was left scrubbing the cafe floors. Every time a customer complimented how clean the place looked, Mom would smile proudly, never once mentioning the child who had knelt to polish every single tile and glass pane. My efforts were invisible, just like me. One time, I mustered the courage to ask Mom to enroll me in a night art class, the only thing I truly loved. She looked at me, as if I had said something absurd. The money's already saved for Madison's summer camp, she said curtly, turning away as if the conversation had never happened. I learned to accept. I learned to stay silent. I learned to tell myself that if I couldn't be a star, at least, I shouldn't be a burden. But every time I saw Madison confidently stepping out into the world, I couldn't help but wonder. Was it my fault? Was I truly as insignificant as they made me feel? The shadow they built around me grew heavier by the year. But what they didn't realize was that the loneliness, the silence, the constant belittling, were quietly forging a strength they never anticipated. One day, I swore to myself, I would step out of that shadow, not for them to see me, but for me to finally see myself. And this is where my story begins. That moment burned into my memory, the night Madison received her acceptance letter from Brown University. Our little house exploded in laughter and cheers. Mom danced around the living room, hugging Madison so tightly she squeaked, while Dad popped open the most expensive bottle of wine I'd ever seen at home. "A daughter! An Ivy League student!" Mom choked out, clutching the acceptance letter like it was a golden ticket to paradise. I stood pressed against the staircase railing, clutching my final report card. GPA 3.6, not bad for a kid who had to juggle school and part-time cafe work. But no one asked about my grades. No one looked back. All night, Madison's laughter filled every corner of the house, drowning out everything else. I whispered a quiet congratulations to myself before retreating to my room. I had gotten used to being the background character during their celebrations, or so I thought. 1 week later, Mom and Dad announced they were throwing a party to celebrate Madison. They booked the fanciest Italian restaurant in town, ordered a 3-tier cake, and invited nearly everyone they knew, including people I didn't even recognize. "You deserve a grand beginning," Mom beamed, double-checking the guest list. I smiled faintly. Inside, I told myself, my time will come. 2 years later, it was finally my turn to chase my college dream. I had done everything I could. Studied hard. Joined volunteer clubs, taken part-time internships, poured my heart into my personal essay. When I received my acceptance letter from Rutgers University, I almost broke down with relief. I clutched the letter and ran to the living room where my parents were watching TV. "I got in," I shouted, heart pounding. "I'm going to study financial management. Rutgers University." Dad looked up blankly. Mom offered a tight smile and muted the TV. "Rutgers?" she repeated, as if the name was a stain on the carpet. "Not Brent." I blinked hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I did my research. Their finance program is strong, and the tuition isn't too expensive. If you could help with the initial costs." Mom laughed. A short, cold bark. Olivia, get real. We don't have spare money for whimsical experiments. I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. But you saved for Madison. Dad set his glass of water down heavily on the table. That was different, he said evenly. She had a clear future. She was a worthy investment. I swallowed hard. And me? Mom crossed her arms. You, she said, shaking her head. You should be practical. Manage the cafe maybe. That's a more secure future than wasting money on a useless degree. No congratulations. No hugs. No proud looks. Just a cold, solid wall standing before me. I could work while studying, I pleaded. I'll take out a loan. You just have to co-sign. We don't borrow, Mom cut in sharply. It's a family principle. I looked at them. The two people I once loved the most. Now nothing but stone statues. You wouldn't even have to pay much, I whispered, almost begging. Just help me get started. No, Dad said, final and absolute. We did enough for Madison. Now it's your turn to take responsibility for your own life. I stood there for a few more seconds, waiting for a miracle. But nothing came, except the icy silence. That night, I sat alone in my room, the soft yellow light casting a glow over the college acceptance letter lying on my bed. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall, drop by drop, like a funeral for my last illusions. By dawn, I wasn't crying anymore. I sat up straight, carefully folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer. If they didn't believe in me, I would believe in myself. If they wouldn't support me, I would find my own way. If family wasn't the place where dreams took flight, I would grow wings on my own. And I knew exactly who I needed to find. The only ones who had ever looked at me with true belief, my grandparents. I mustered every ounce of courage and walked to their small house at the end of Elm Street, my hands trembling as I knocked. When Grandma opened the door, all it took was one look and I broke down. I told them everything, holding nothing back. The pain, the humiliation, and the fragile hope I still clung to. Grandpa gripped my shoulder, his wrinkled face full of anger. No grandchild of ours will ever give up their dreams because of selfish adults, he said, his voice shaking with fury. And when I looked into his warm eyes, for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I mattered. I didn't know how hard the journey ahead would be. Then you knew. I wouldn't give up. Because the dream was mine, and I would fight for it. Grandma's kitchen always smelled like baked apple pies and old damp wood from decades past. I sat at the chipped wooden table, my hands clasped tightly together, overwhelmed by shame and despair. Grandpa sat across from me, deep in thought, while Grandma busied herself pouring tea, as if moving her hands would ease her heartache. I tried talking to them, I choked out. I begged, but they— No need to say more, Grandpa interrupted, his voice low and solid as bedrock. We understand. Grandma's gentle eyes rested on me, but her hands shook slightly, spilling a few drops of tea onto the saucer. We won't let you give up just because your parents are blind, she said, her voice frail but firm. I shook my head, tears spilling down my cheeks. I don't want to burden you. I just need a little support, a small amount. Grandpa leaned on the table, his eyes suddenly blazing as if he had made the most important decision of his life. This house— he took a deep breath. We still have the cabin in Cheshire, remember? I nodded, my throat tightening. That cabin, the summer haven of my childhood, was a treasure trove of memories. Every scratch on the wooden floors, every faded curtain had a story. We'll sell it, Grandpa said firmly. The money will be enough for you to start at Rutgers. No, I jumped up, knocking the chair over behind me. That's your legacy. I can't let you sacrifice that. Grandpa smiled, a sad, proud smile. Our real legacy, Olivia, isn't that cabin. It's you. I collapsed into tears, burying my face in my hands. Grandma came over and wrapped her small but sturdy arms around me, like a fortress against the whole world. The process of selling the cabin went faster than we expected. Property prices were rising, and a young couple dreaming of peaceful summers seized the opportunity. On the day of the contract signing, Grandpa wore his old suit, the same one he had worn to his daughter's wedding, and Grandma wore a faded floral dress. I came along, clutching my Rutgers enrollment papers tightly in my bag. When Grandpa signed the final paper, I noticed his hand tremble, not from hesitation, but from heartbreak. "We're buying our granddaughter a future," he said softly, as if to reassure himself. On the drive back, none of us said much, only the sound of the wind whistling through the cracked window, carrying the smell of freshly cut grass and the heavy breath of unspoken dreams. That evening, we sat in the small kitchen, eating simple sandwiches and drinking plain water. No party, no fireworks. Just the sparkling pride in their eyes, and my heart, warm for the first time in a long, long while. The enrollment process was quickly completed. With the money from the cabin sale and a few small scholarships, I officially became a student in investment management at Rutgers University. The day I prepared to leave their house for school, New Hampshire's sky was heavy with thick gray clouds, as if the sky itself was mourning with us. My suitcase was ready, my old backpack slung over my shoulder. I turned for one last look at their small house. Grandpa placed his hand on my shoulder. "You may stumble, Olivia, but you'll never fall. You were born to fly." Grandma tucked a small paper bag into my hand. "Homemade cookies. No matter where you go, remember, you always have a home to come back to." I hugged them tightly, feeling the steady beat of their hearts. The hearts that had saved my life. The bus arrived. I climbed on, sitting by the window, resting my forehead against the cold glass. As the bus pulled away, I saw them standing there, waving, small but unyielding, until they disappeared into the mist. The Rutgers dorms were simple, nothing luxurious. But to me, they were heaven. I pinned a small family photo on my desk, just Grandpa, Grandma, and me, and started a new chapter. Each day, I studied harder than anyone else. Not for grades. Not to prove anything to Madison or my parents. But because I carried the sacrifices of my grandparents in every breath, every step I took. Every time exhaustion threatened to crush me, I just needed to remember the day they sold the cabin. To remind myself that quitting wasn't an option. Couldn't be. Would never be. 4 years of college passed in the blink of an eye, but every day was a battle. I graduated with my degree in investment management, not with the best GPA, but with the resilience no school could ever teach. The job market was even bleaker than I expected. I sent dozens of applications, attended countless interviews, received an avalanche of rejections. Every time I failed, I remembered the look in my grandparents' eyes the day they sent me off. And I clenched my fists tighter, pushed forward. Finally, a small trading company named Hamilton & Co., located in the city's outskirts, offered me a position. Not a prestigious firm. Not a high salary. But it was my first door. The day I received the confirmation email, I jumped up in pure joy in my tiny room with peeling walls. I signed the lease for a small apartment on Willow Street. Cramped, old, but for the first time in my life, a place I could call home, through my own efforts. I paid my own utilities, bought old dishes from thrift stores, assembled a rickety wooden bookshelf myself. No one helped. No one congratulated me. But I had never felt prouder of myself. One Thursday afternoon, while struggling through a financial report at my tiny 3-desk office, my phone suddenly rang. Madison's name flashed across the screen. I stared at it for a few seconds before answering. "Olivia! It's been so long." Madison's voice was sugary sweet, but I was old enough now to hear the falseness behind every syllable. "Yeah, it has," I replied, cautious. "The family's having a gathering this weekend," she continued. "Nathan and I would love to invite you over for dinner to celebrate your new job. And by the way, I'm getting engaged." I stiffened. Engaged? No prior notice? No real conversation in years? And now, suddenly, a grand announcement? Still, a small part of me nurtured a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the family had changed. Maybe this time, they would truly be proud of me. That Saturday night, I stood outside Madison and Nathan's neat townhouse, wearing my best white blouse and light blue jeans, the nicest things I could manage. Nathan opened the door with a half-hearted smile, letting me in. The living room was bathed in light, filled with brand new furniture. My parents sat on the plush sofa, red wine swirling in their glasses. "Probably a long time no see," Mom chirped, her smile never reaching her eyes. I forced a neutral tone. "Hello everyone." Dinner started with shallow questions and hollow laughter. Then, as if she couldn't hold it back any longer, Madison dropped the first bomb. "You're working at Hamilton and Co., right?" She raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "That company. Is it mostly managing assets for small shops?" I nodded. "Yes. It's a small company, but it gives me a lot of opportunities to learn." My mother let out a sharp, dry laugh. "And you needed a college degree for that, Olivia? I told you before, jobs like that, anyone willing to work hard enough could do." My father nodded leisurely, swirling his wineglass. "If you had just listened back then, you could be managing our cafe by now, instead of wasting time and money on college." I set my knife and fork down on my plate, fighting the tremble rising in my hands. "Leslie," Madison continued, her voice sweet but laced with mockery. "Nathan and I just toured a new place in Uptown, a penthouse. And you're renting somewhere, Willow Street, right? I heard that neighborhood's full of crime now." The table erupted in stifled giggles, leaking out despite their efforts. I clenched my hands under the table, feeling my blood boil, but I refused to let them see me break. I looked Madison straight in the eye and smiled. "Yeah, it's not a perfect area, but at least I pay my own rent, not waiting for Mom and Dad to buy it, or for someone else to gift it as an engagement present." The air at the table froze instantly. My mother's face turned pale. Madison's eyes widened. Nathan cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to change the subject. All right, let's not ruin the evening." I stood up, dragging my chair back loudly across the wooden floor. "I didn't come here to be insulted," I said, voice trembling but firm. "If you invited me just to remind me I'm less than, sorry, but I don't need it. I'm used to it." No one said anything. No one tried to stop me. I walked to the door, grabbing the cold doorknob. Before leaving, I turned back and gave them one last look. A gaze, stripped of any sadness, leaving only disdain. "Congratulations on the wedding, Madison," I said, a faint smile playing on my lips. "But don't forget, the ones who truly stand tall aren't those who have the most. It's those who don't need to beg anyone for anything." I opened the door and stepped out into the chilly night. The wind whipped across my face, cold, yet strangely freeing. That night, I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment, clutching a cup of hot tea, staring at the glittering stars through the old window. I knew I hadn't achieved great success yet. I knew I hadn't reached my dream heights. But at least, I was standing strong. Without them. And that was my first real victory. About 3 months after that humiliating dinner, my life took an unexpected turn. I was hunched over transaction reports in the stifling office when my phone rang. It was Lisa, the old roommate from college, the only friend who had stayed in touch. "Olivia!" Lisa practically screamed into the phone, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Remember Maxwell Investment Group? The firm we always dreamed about getting into?" I almost dropped the pen in my hand. "Maxwell, of course. But come on, that was just a fantasy." "The door's open, dummy," Lisa laughed. "They just opened a branch here in town. They're hiring junior investment analysts. I already submitted your application. Your resume is strong enough." I froze. Maxwell Investment Group. The monument of the investment world. A place where just getting hired meant you had one foot in the elite. Oh, I had always thought it was a distant dream, reserved for Ivy League graduates. Not for someone like me. Someone my family had always considered less. I'm not sure, I whispered, my heart pounding. Trust me, Lisa said firmly. You're better than half the people they already hired. Don't let anyone,